Hi everyone, I'm Lorraine Driscoll, and this is another episode of Building Better Brains, where each week I share information and tips on how to help your child improve their learning, reading, and behavioral difficulties in ways that address the root cause and reach beyond the limitations of medication, endless tutoring, and IEPs. So today I want to talk about homeschooling tips. I've talked quite a bit about why that should not necessarily be at the top of your priority list if you're struggling with mental health, if your children seem to be really dysregulated and so forth. But I do want to address how to navigate this whole new world of homeschooling that so many of us are embarking on, because I know that a lot of parents are pulling their hair out. They've never done this, and I've reached out quite a bit to homeschooling parents in the last few weeks. I have done some interviews. You can check that out if you go to my Facebook page. However, I wanted to kind of condense that because I know that those interviews were longer, and some people just don't have the time or the attention span to tune into those tips and interviews and so forth. And I thought it would be great just to kind of condense all this information that I've gathered and that I've found from talking to homeschooling parents on how to kind of make this work, what works and what doesn't. And I want to be clear before I start that nothing is going to work for everyone. So, this tends to be, the things I'm going to talk about tends to be the things that typically work and that typically help and, to consider and so forth. But obviously every child is different, every family, its schedule and so forth are different. So the first thing is to, that really came through with most parents, is to create a space. And I know that has certainly been the case with myself, with my own daughter. We did try doing homeschooling from the couch and then homeschooling there the next day. And it just doesn't seem to create a sense of structure or, seriousness or something about it. And a lot of the homeschooling parents said, having, even if it is at the kitchen table, but, everything is clear and you're using that space during that time. And that's kind of the drill, if you will, that every time you go to that specific spot and do your work. The other thing is routine. So I've written quite a bit about, we need to be cognizant of routine and how it's going to be different for every family. But one thing that has come through with talking to homeschooling parents, talking to clients, talking to people in Facebook groups that I'm in, I would say 90% of the people say what's keeping them sane right now is having a routine. The people who said that they were kind of going crazy and now are finding their way found that a routine is what worked. And I'm going to get more into that in the following weeks, next week actually. So I'm not going to talk about that too much of how to kind of adjust and tailor all that. But just to keep in mind that routine can really create a sense of safety. I think I've mentioned that before. And also just kind of creates a sense of normalcy. So part of that routine is like normal bedtimes, kids being rested, having had their breakfast. I advise, making them change out of their pajamas. You don't have to, but for a lot of kids, it just kind of resets them and gets them in, okay, this is, the new thing and there's some normalcy to this. We're not just lounging around in our PJs till 5 o'clock in the afternoon or in the evening. And then even, do the exercise. Like, a lot of kids, first of all, they do have a morning recess and they're not getting that before they go into school or class. And don't be shy to do a bit of morning exercise or even going outside if the weather's, nice enough to do that. Whatever is going to work for your child to get them settled and more able to learn and focus and so forth. So just to kind of touch on the advantages to homeschooling, I've mentioned this before, but I feel like I need to mention it again. Homeschooling is not something people do for 6 hours a day. Homeschoolers do not spend 6 hours a day homeschooling. It is more efficient when you homeschool. It's one-on-one. There's not all these interruptions, all of these other processes and routines that have to take place. So, just keep that in mind, that a lot of homeschoolers spend about 2-3 hours at the most, and that's more with high school students. And I think that for a lot of parents, that can be like, really, are they really getting the right education? And what really blew me out of the water is whenever I learned that Amish children tend to be done by noon hour, and near Toronto, St. Jacobs Village, a lot of the Amish children are done their grade 12 education by the time they're 13 years old. So, don't assume that it's not about quantity, it's about quality. And so the big thing is making the schedule that works for you. For some people, they want it to be really kind of strict or rigid, or I want to say rigid, but we're doing math at this time, we're doing language at this time, or whatever the case may be. And for other people, it can just be, you need to do this before you do this. Like you need to I know for myself, what works best is with my daughter is, okay, you're going to have to do some math and some reading before you get onto technology or start playing your games or whatever it is you're doing. So again, take breaks, have recess, and keep in mind with routine doesn't mean that there's no flexibility. And what I love about this homeschooling is that a lot of kids can't focus over 50 minutes on a math activity or an English lesson. And what you can have them do instead is, if they're really struggling with math, they can do 10 minutes at a time. There's one mom I was talking to who has a child who's a lot of special needs, and she said what she does is she has her child do 10 minutes of math, 5 minutes of a game, 10 minutes of math, 5 minutes of a game. You can do 15, 20. I mean, if you know your child can handle more than that, great. But there's so many options right now in how we can structure that. And then keep in mind, it's not how many hours. Whatever it is you're doing, and whether it's hands-on learning, real-world learning, cooking, whether it's times tables, whatever the case may be, keep in mind that when they did studies on neuroplasticity and how the brain changes and learns something, it is not if you do an hour a day. It's if you do 15 minutes a day on a consistent basis. And I know for myself, when I was learning to play guitar, I was trying to go at it for an hour, and I just found it really hard, and I don't know, I just wasn't enjoying it. And then someone told me, just do 50 minutes and then go to it later on and do 50 minutes. And then I actually was doing 50 minutes 3 times a day at one point. And I found that much more fun. It was easier on my fingers for guitar whenever my fingers were building up those calluses. But there's tons of studies on that. So don't feel like you need to be doing everything in 45-minute or 50-minute blocks. And then keep in mind that learning occurs all day, which I've mentioned before, right? That homeschooling doesn't just count in terms of the time your child is sitting reading a textbook or doing e-learning and so forth. So I know that in certain provinces and certain states, people are engaged in e-learning. And I know that in other provinces and states, there's people who their schools are closed and there's nothing being provided. So start with the basics. I really suggest that if you're freestyling and you don't know where to begin, before you start overwhelming yourself with curriculum and just the endless sea, which is like a black hole of resources, does your child know their times tables? Can your child read well? Does your child know the map of Canada or the map of the United States? Do they know basic grammar rules? Those are the things that drive teachers crazy, drive parents crazy. How is it that they don't know this yet? And so forth. Start with the basics. Everybody will thank you, including yourself and your child. So the other big challenge that has come up a lot with parents is, what do I do if there's resistance? My child doesn't want to work and all that type of stuff. So keep in mind, this is a learning curve for all of us, and it does take time to find your rhythm. Moms who are new to homeschooling, right? Not all moms homeschool their kids from the beginning. There's lots of moms I know who had their kid in the regular school system. It was an absolute nightmare. They weren't learning anything. There was major behavior problems. And what the answer was homeschooling them. And it took them time too to establish, I'm the teacher, this is the time we're going to be working, this is our new routine, this is the new normal, we're going to go out to homeschool co-ops at this time. So don't get discouraged if it takes time to find your rhythm and so forth. And so you might be asking, okay, but what are some tips or tricks to motivate my child? Again, the big thing is routine. And the reason I say that is because what creates a habit is we no longer debate doing it because it's a habit, right? Like, it's my habit to take a shower every day. I'm not like, should I take a shower every day? It's just automatic. It's my habit. I'm one of those people, I don't know why, I make my bed every morning and I have to, and it's just like, it's an impulse, if you will. It just happens, and I don't have to have this ongoing battle inside. And whenever we make something a routine and a habit, there's less resistance, and that's the same for kids. So when I first started having my daughter do dishes, of course it was the whining and I don't want to do this and kind of sulking when she was doing them. And now she knows she has to do the dishes, and there's no discussion, there's no resistance, because she's expected to do it all the time. Whenever I was more, okay, I'm going to ask you to do the dishes today, it was like, what? This isn't part of the routine. So the more you make something part of the routine, at first it might be difficult to establish that, the more eventually that it will just become the new normal, but you got to kind of stick to your guns. The other tip that a lot of homeschooling parents says works the best, just really straightforward, first then approach. So first you have to do this and then you get to do this. So a lot of moms said, first thing in the morning, they have to do, these activities, and then they get their carrot, which is going outside and playing this or working on that or building this and so forth. And I do think that morning is a really good time to be doing those academic activities for most kids. Again, it totally depends. And I know that there's a lot of parents who are still working and that's not an option, but just to kind of keep that in mind. So the other thing is just to try to stay calm, because teaching your kid is not easy. It takes skill, right? There's different strategies to teaching and explaining, and you might not have all those strategies and skills probably, right? So just keep in mind, try to have a sense of humor about it. Even myself, math is not my forte, and I was working with my daughter doing math the other day, and we were both getting really frustrated, and I just started realizing how I needed to be the adult and be more relaxed and calm about this. So I started kind of making jokes about it. Not about the math, just to kind of lighten her mood up, because I could tell her frustration levels were growing. And whether you're helping your child with reading or whatever, trying to make it an activity even where you're bonding. And to the point where by the end of the week, when my daughter and I first started doing some serious math together, she actually said, yeah, I really like doing math with you, Mommy, and that was not happening before because we both weren't enjoying it. So let me know how homeschooling is going for you. Post in the comments what your challenges are, what successes you've had, what has worked, what has not worked. I'm really curious to hear, and I'm sure other people would be really curious to hear what's working, what's not, and how we can help and share with each other. Thanks for watching.